I wanted to let you know first that I'm going to do another Ignatian sermon this morning. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that's cool because I kind of sort of invented this. Probably not. Probably some other priests have done it. But St. Ignatius 500 years ago said, train people to immerse themselves in studying the gospel by imagining themselves in the story and observing, being an observer, watching and listening and hearing sound, smell, sound, smells, touch, taste, everything they see and reporting it. And so what I try to do with these sermons is give you a kind of immersion in that kind of situation, which we're going to do with today's gospel. So, and then you'll come out of it with whatever you want. And the best part about this is I invite you to close your eyes. So if you actually go to sleep, I won't know. I'll just assume you're listening. So that's fine. But first of all, you've got something to imagine. Imagine that you are a Jew living in first century Jerusalem, and the Sabbath is about to begin. And you are preparing quietly for your dinner when there is a surprisingly loud knock at your door. It's your friend and neighbor, Malachi, the sandal maker. He's shaking and crying. You've never seen him cry before. It disturbs you. Through his sobs, he tells you that Jesus, the prophet, the teacher you both had thought was the Messiah, has been crucified. You listen, stunned, and as he continues to talk, you feel as if you are in a fog. All this does not seem real to you. Just 5 days ago, Jesus rode through the streets of Jerusalem on a donkey. You and Malachi were there, singing hosannas, waving palm leaves in the air, and laying them on the ground like a royal carpet. Malachi looks at you sorrowfully and says, "He was our king just those few days ago. I believed that he was the Messiah, come to save us all." We were all so joyful. A new day was dawning for Judeans. You know how I followed him to the temple the next day, and he threw out all the money changers, turned their tables over, told them to be gone. He was angry, a just anger. What he did was right. The next day, he taught at the temple, telling stories to all of us gathered there. But then the Pharisees interrupted. I see now that they must have already been planning to do away with him. That day, they wanted to trap him, to give the Romans an excuse to kill him. Such flatterers they were, but Jesus saw right through them. They called him Rabbi, teacher, and they said, "We know you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with the truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality." Such honeyed words, but true, nevertheless. Jesus did not regard people with partiality. He spoke directly to everyone, and he spoke the truth always. But in the mouths of those Pharisees, those sweet words were lies. They hated him, and we all knew it. And then the Pharisees asked him the question meant to trick him. They said, "Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" Such a question. Is it lawful? They said, the law. They were asking him to give an answer consistent with the teachings of the Torah. But Jesus had lost patience with their games. He immediately called them hypocrites and asked them why they were putting him to the test. I don't think the Pharisees expected Jesus to confront them like that. They were so arrogant. They really did not understand him. So Jesus took control of the conversation and asked the Pharisees to show him the coin that is used for the tax. Their response was almost comical. All of them together immediately reached into their money bags and started to fumble around. Each of them brought out a denarius, equal to a day's wages, and held it on his outstretched palm. Jesus tilted his head and raised an eyebrow, and a wry smile played about his lips. He let the ironic moment linger. Jesus did not carry a denarius in his purse. He would not do so and would never carry it into the temple because the Roman coin was blasphemous. It was imprinted with the face of the emperor, Tiberius Caesar. In Latin, the coin read, Tiberius Caesar, divi Augusti filius Augustus pontifex maximus. That means Tiberius Caesar, illustrious son of the divine Augustus, high priest. The coin said that Tiberius is the Son of God. Blasphemy. Jesus would not carry such a coin, but all the Pharisees did, carried them right into the temple on that day. The Pharisees' trick question asked Jesus about the vile head tax we've had for about 30 years now, the census tax, the census. For every man, woman, and slave from 12 years of age to 65, we pay 1 denarius with Tiberius' face. How we all hate that tax. Every time we pay it, we are reminded we are under the boot of our oppressors, the Romans. As I waited for Jesus to answer their question, I held my breath. It was clearly a trap. If he said, yes, pay it, all his fellow Judeans who resented the Romans and wished them gone would be angry at him, especially the nationalists, the zealots, who are so prone to violence. On the other hand, if he said, no, don't pay it, he would anger all the powers that be. He would be arrested by the Romans for sedition. And to make matters worse, that day, the Pharisees had brought the Herodians along with them to confront Jesus. Herodians, the supporters of the puppet king of Palestine, Herod Agrippa Antipas, the puppet the Romans controlled. The Herodians have everything to lose if the people ever rise against the Romans. They are dangerous men who would not have hesitated to demand Jesus be killed. But Jesus did not touch the coins the Pharisees held in their hands. He pointed to one and knowingly said, whose head is this? Whose title? The Pharisees all answered together like eager students sitting at the feet of a rabbi. The emperor's, they said. Jesus paused ever so slightly, pointed again to the coin, and said calmly, give, therefore, to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. No one moved. It was a good answer, rather indirect, but the best answer. It was the emperor's coin, after all. It had his face. So give it back to him, Jesus said. But then he added, and give to God the things that are God's. At that moment, he reminded all of us, including the Pharisees and Herodians, where everything really comes from, that all things are from God, that it is to God, to Yahweh, that we owe our allegiance, our love, our adoration, and our lives. He reminded me that I too often forget to whom I belong. I see the Roman soldiers around us, and I feel like a powerless slave, like they own me. It's as if that inscription on the coin is also inscribed on my body. But Jesus reminded me that I only belong to God and that I must trust that God will care for me. The Pharisees and the Herodians said nothing after Jesus answered. They walked away, speechless, defeated. And now, look what they have done. They plotted his death, and they convinced the Romans to kill him. As your friend Malachi stops speaking, he begins to cry again. Tears flow from his eyes. You attempt to comfort him, but you know this deep is grief and shakes the foundations of his faith and his hope. You know, because it is also shaking yours. Years later, you will remember this day. You will remember the sorrow and the loss, not just the loss of the teacher Jesus, but the loss of hope also. You will remember all this, but you will smile. Smile because in the days that followed, you and Malachi learned that Jesus had turned the world of Rome, the Pharisees and the Herodians, upside down. You learned that he had conquered death. And in your hearts, yours and Malachi's, you knew that, yes, there were things, meaningless things, that belonged to Caesar, that must be rendered unto Caesar. But that when all is said and done, everything else, including you and all you had, belonged to God. And to God, through the grace of Jesus Christ, you would render your life, your love, and all. Amen.